Rain tapped softly against the carriage window as Arabella Hawthorne watched the towers of another noble estate disappear behind her. The gray sky seemed determined to follow her wherever she went, and she could not entirely blame it. By 28, she had become a woman accustomed to leaving through servants' entrances while others whispered behind closed doors. The dismissal letter rested in her lap. She had read it 12 times during the journey. Each reading heard exactly the same. Miss Arabella Hawthorne, your services are no longer required. The behavior of our son has deteriorated under your supervision, and we believe a different governess would better suit our household. The words were polite. The truth was not. Lord Pembroke's spoiled son had shattered 3 windows, insulted 2 tutors, and released 6 chickens into the ballroom during a dinner party. Arabella had done everything possible to correct him. Unfortunately, the boy's mother preferred convenient lies over uncomfortable truths. A governess was easier to blame. A governess always was. Arabella folded the letter and slipped it back into her worn leather satchel. It joined a collection of similar letters accumulated over the years. Some had been kinder. Others had been crueler. None had changed the outcome. She was unemployed again. Outside, rain streaked across fields of fading green. Villages appeared and vanished in the distance. Smoke curled from chimneys. Families gathered inside warm homes while she traveled toward an uncertain future. Once, she had belonged to a family respected throughout the kingdom. Once, Hawthorne House had hosted lavish dinners attended by nobles and ministers. Once, Lord Nathaniel Beaumont had promised to marry her. Those days felt as distant as childhood dreams. Her father's investments had collapsed during a financial panic that destroyed dozens of aristocratic fortunes. Debt swallowed their estate. Creditors seized everything. Friends vanished with astonishing speed. Nathaniel vanished fastest of all. 3 weeks after her family's ruin became public knowledge, he returned her engagement ring through a servant. Arabella had not seen him since. The memory no longer brought tears. Only silence. The carriage rounded a bend and the driver called for a brief stop at a coaching inn. Arabella stepped into the damp afternoon air and purchased tea with some of her remaining coins. She counted what was left afterward. The amount frightened her. For the first time in years, genuine fear pressed against her composure. If she failed to find work soon, she would have nowhere to go. No family remained. No fortune waited. No rescue was coming. That evening, as she sat beside the inn's fire, she overheard 2 travelers discussing a position available at Ravenshire Castle. The name immediately caught her attention. Everyone knew Ravenshire. Duke Sebastian Ravenshire was respected throughout the kingdom for his integrity, intelligence, and devotion to duty. Everyone also knew another rumor. No governess lasted long within his household. 23 of them, one traveler said, shaking his head. 23. Over 6 years. The second man laughed softly. Those children must be monsters. Or heartbroken. The conversation lingered in Arabella's thoughts long after the travelers departed. The following morning she purchased passage toward Ravenshire. It was a desperate decision. Perhaps desperation was exactly what she needed. 2 days later, the castle emerged from the countryside like something carved from a forgotten age. Dark stone towers rose above rolling hills. Ancient gardens surrounded sweeping terraces. Great iron gates guarded the entrance. The estate possessed extraordinary beauty, yet a strange sadness seemed woven through the landscape. Even the fountains appeared quieter than they should have been. Arabella felt it immediately. This was not a castle lacking wealth. It was a castle lacking joy. A footman escorted her through vast corridors lined with portraits. Among them hung a painting of a beautiful woman with warm eyes and a gentle smile. The late Duchess. Fresh flowers rested beneath her portrait. Someone still mourned her deeply. Minutes later, Arabella was shown into the Duke's study. Sebastian Ravenshire stood beside a window overlooking the western gardens. He was taller than she expected. His dark coat was immaculate. His expression was composed. Only his eyes betrayed exhaustion. They were the eyes of a man carrying burdens no one else could see. Miss Hawthorne. His voice was calm and measured. Your Grace. They exchanged formal greetings before he gestured toward a chair. Unlike previous employers, he did not immediately question her qualifications. Instead, he asked about her experiences, her challenges, her beliefs regarding children. Arabella answered honestly. She spoke about patience, about trust, about grief. She admitted she had failed before. She admitted children were not problems to solve but people to understand. For the first time during an interview, she stopped trying to sound perfect. Sebastian listened carefully. More than once, she noticed his attention sharpen. When she finished speaking, silence settled between them. Then the study door opened. A small boy wandered inside. Golden curls framed his round face. He looked no older than 5. Lord Henry Ravenshire. The child glanced at Arabella curiously. She smiled. He stared for several moments. Sebastian watched with visible surprise. "Henry usually avoids strangers," he said quietly. The boy ignored him. Instead, he walked directly toward Arabella. Something vulnerable flickered across his face. Loneliness. Recognition. Oh. Arabella knelt to his height. "Hello, Henry." The child hesitated. Then he smiled back. A tiny smile. But real. Something shifted in the room. Sebastian seemed to feel it too. His gaze moved from his youngest son to Arabella and back again. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then the Duke finally broke the silence. "My 4 children need a loving mother," he said softly. "And you need a home." Arabella's breath caught. The words carried no romance. Only honesty. Only longing. Only the weary hope of a father trying to save what remained of his family. Outside, evening sunlight touched the castle windows for the first time that day. And beside her, little Henry slowly reached for her hand. The first week at Ravenshire Castle felt less like accepting a position and more like stepping into the ruins of a storm. Arabella quickly discovered that the stories were true. 23 governesses had indeed come before her. 23 had surrendered. The children had not driven them away with cruelty. They had driven them away with grief. Each governess had arrived carrying rules, schedules, punishments, and expectations. Each had attempted to repair the children without first understanding what had broken them. Arabella chose a different path. She began by listening. The eldest, Oliver Ravenshire, carried himself like a young lord twice his age. At 13, he walked the estate with account books beneath his arm and spoke more often with stewards than boys his own age. One chilly morning, Arabella found him reviewing tenant reports in the library. Sunlight filtered through stained glass and painted colors across the floor. "You should be outside," she said gently. Oliver barely looked up. "Father needs help. Your father needs a son." He frowned. "I am his son." "No," Arabella replied softly. "You're acting like his replacement." The words struck deeper than she intended. For several moments he stared silently at the pages before him. Later that afternoon, she convinced him to join Henry in flying kites across the western meadow. At first he resisted. Within an hour he was laughing. It was the first time any servant could remember hearing that sound. Theo proved far more difficult. The 11-year-old viewed every adult with suspicion. He challenged instructions, ignored lessons, questioned every promise. Arabella understood why almost immediately. Every governess had eventually left. In Theo's mind, attachment led only to disappointment. One rainy afternoon he deliberately released frogs into the schoolroom. The creatures scattered across desks and carpets. Theo waited for punishment. Instead, Arabella calmly helped him gather them. "You aren't angry?" he asked. "I suspect you're testing me." His expression hardened. "And if I am? Then I suspect someone disappointed you before I arrived." The boy's defenses wavered. Only briefly. But Arabella noticed. Small victories mattered. Rose was the quietest of all. At 8 years old, she drifted through the castle like a ghost. She attended lessons, answered questions politely, never caused trouble, never smiled. One afternoon Arabella discovered dozens of unfinished sketches hidden beneath Rose's bed. Flowers, birds, gardens, portraits. The drawings possessed remarkable talent. "These are beautiful," Arabella said. Rose immediately reached for them. "No." "Why not?" The little girl looked down. "Because Mama used to paint." The simple statement carried years of sorrow. Arabella carefully returned the sketches. "Then perhaps painting can help you remember her." Rose said nothing. Yet the following morning she picked up a paintbrush for the first time in years. The smallest change came from Henry. Or perhaps the largest. The 5-year-old followed Arabella everywhere. Through corridors. Into gardens. Across libraries. Sometimes he simply sat nearby while she worked. He rarely spoke about his mother. Children who lose memories often grieve differently. They mourn what they cannot remember. One evening Arabella found him awake long after bedtime. Moonlight spilled through nursery windows. Henry sat curled beneath blankets. His eyes glistened. "Bad dream?" she whispered. He nodded. "About Mama?" Another nod. Arabella sat beside him. Without hesitation, he climbed into her lap and rested his head against her shoulder. She stayed there until sleep finally claimed him. When she left the nursery, Sebastian stood outside the door. Neither had realized the other was there. The Duke's expression was unreadable, yet something softened in his eyes. "Thank you," he said quietly. Arabella merely smiled. As days became weeks, Ravenshire Castle slowly changed. Not dramatically. Not all at once. The transformation arrived through countless small moments. A family breakfast that lasted longer than necessary. Children lingering after lessons. Music returning to silent rooms. Fresh flowers appearing on tables. Open curtains welcoming sunlight. Laughter echoing through corridors once filled with whispers. Even the servants noticed. The house seemed to breathe again. Sebastian noticed most of all. For years he had lived within walls built from duty and loss. Every morning followed the same routine. Every evening ended in the same silence. Yet now he found himself searching for unexpected sounds. Rose laughing in the gardens. Henry's excited footsteps. Theo arguing about books. Oliver speaking about future adventures rather than responsibilities. At the center of every change stood Arabella. One afternoon Sebastian discovered her kneeling in the greenhouse beside Rose. The little girl was proudly displaying a painting covered in bright spring colors. Rose was smiling. Actually smiling. Sebastian could not remember the last time he had seen such joy on his daughter's face. Something tightened painfully inside his chest. Not sorrow. Something warmer. Something far more dangerous. That evening he joined Arabella during a walk through the rose gardens. The setting sun draped the estate in gold. For a while neither spoke. The silence felt comfortable. Rare. Valuable. "You've accomplished more in a month than anyone else managed in 6 years, Sebastian finally said. Arabella shook her head. "The children accomplished it themselves. You give them too little credit." "No," he replied. "I think perhaps you give yourself too little." Their eyes met. The moment lingered longer than propriety allowed. Both looked away first. Afterward, such moments became increasingly common. Conversations beside fireplaces. Discussions in libraries. Walks beneath evening skies. Neither spoke openly about growing feelings. Neither needed to. Some truths revealed themselves quietly. Like dawn arriving over distant hills. Like winter surrendering to spring. Like a castle slowly awakening from grief. Then came the evening that changed everything. Rain drummed softly against nursery windows. Henry had fallen asleep after listening to one of Arabella's stories. His small hand remained wrapped around her fingers. Arabella carefully brushed curls from his forehead. The room glowed with gentle candlelight. Outside the nursery door, Sebastian paused while passing through the corridor. Inside, Henry shifted slightly in his sleep. A sleepy smile touched his face. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he spoke 2 words that stopped time itself. "Good night, Mama." Arabella froze. Outside the doorway, Sebastian closed his eyes. And neither of them could pretend any more that something extraordinary was happening inside Ravenshire Castle. Spring arrived at Ravenshire Castle with blooming roses, brighter mornings, and a happiness the estate had not known in years. Unfortunately, happiness rarely remained hidden for long. The kingdom noticed the change. Visitors arriving at Ravenshire found children laughing in the gardens instead of wandering silent corridors. Servants smiled more often. Music drifted from open windows. Even Duke Sebastian Ravenshire appeared younger somehow, as though years of sorrow had quietly loosened their grip upon him. Questions soon followed. Questions became whispers. Whispers became rumors. Rumors became scandal. The first gossip appeared during a charity gala in the capital. A countess remarked that Sebastian seemed unusually attentive toward his governess. A viscount suggested that the children's remarkable transformation could not entirely explain the Duke's devotion. Another noblewoman claimed she had seen them walking together beneath moonlit gardens. By midnight, half the ballroom was discussing Arabella Hawthorne. By morning, the entire city was. Arabella learned of the rumors from servants attempting to hide newspapers before she could read them. Unfortunately, hiding them only confirmed their existence. One article described her as an ambitious governess seeking advancement through emotional manipulation. Another implied she had deliberately charmed the children to secure her future. The words stung more than she cared to admit. Not because they were true. Because they were familiar. People had always found it easier to question a woman's motives than acknowledge her character. She folded the newspaper and placed it aside. Yet the hurt lingered. Across the kingdom, one woman followed every rumor with growing fury. Lady Celeste Ashcombe. Beautiful, wealthy, and born into one of the oldest noble families in the realm, Celeste had spent years believing her future was inevitable. Everyone assumed she would eventually become Duchess of Ravenshire, including Celeste herself. She had attended dinners beside Sebastian, shared countless social events, received approval from influential families. Most importantly, she possessed everything society valued: beauty, status, fortune. Then a governess arrived, and suddenly none of those advantages seemed enough. Celeste refused to accept it. If Arabella could not be removed quietly, she would be destroyed publicly. The campaign began subtly. A suggestion here, a rumor there, an insinuation delivered with a sympathetic smile. By the end of the month, noblewomen throughout the capital discussed Arabella as though she were a social climber rather than a respected governess. Invitations stopped arriving. Conversations ended when she entered rooms. Even some visitors to Ravenshire began treating her differently. Arabella endured it with dignity. Yet every slight left another invisible wound. Sebastian noticed. One evening he found her alone in the library staring into a dying fire. The room glowed with amber light and shadows. "You've been avoiding meals?" he said. Arabella looked up. "I wasn't hungry." The lie sounded fragile. Sebastian crossed the room. "You're allowing them to hurt you. They're hurting you as well." "I don't care what society says." "I do." The words escaped before she could stop them. Silence followed. Heavy. Uncomfortable. Honest. Arabella lowered her gaze. "Your children have finally found peace. The estate is thriving. The kingdom respects you. I won't become the reason any of that changes." Sebastian studied her face. What struck him most was not fear. It was sacrifice. She worried more about protecting his reputation than defending her own. The realization settled deeply inside him. Before either could speak further, a footman entered carrying a visiting card. The name written upon it turned Arabella's blood cold. Lord Nathaniel Beaumont. For a moment she thought she had misread it. But memory never forgets certain names, especially the ones that break your heart. The following afternoon, Nathaniel arrived. Time had changed him less than she expected. He remained handsome, elegant, confident. Yet something calculating lingered behind his smile. Sebastian greeted him politely. Arabella merely endured his presence. Nathaniel quickly requested a private conversation. Against her better judgment, she agreed. They met in the rose gardens. The same gardens where she had spent countless peaceful evenings with the Ravenshire children. Now the beauty felt distant. "I searched for you," Nathaniel said. Arabella almost laughed. "No, you didn't." Regret flickered across his features. "When your family lost everything, I was young. You were 30. I made mistakes. You made choices." The distinction landed precisely where intended. Nathaniel's expression tightened. For several moments he said nothing. Then his gaze shifted toward the castle, toward Sebastian, toward possibility. "You've become quite important here." Understanding arrived immediately. He did not want forgiveness. He wanted advantage. The realization extinguished whatever lingering affection memory had preserved. "I hope you find what you're looking for," Arabella said calmly. "But it won't be with me." She walked away before he could answer. Nathaniel's pride did not tolerate rejection well. Within days, retaliation followed. At a grand social gathering attended by aristocrats from across the kingdom, Nathaniel publicly revealed Arabella's family history. He spoke of financial ruin, lost estates, bankruptcy, social disgrace. The details spread through the ballroom like wildfire. Laughter followed. Not loud laughter. Worse, polite laughter. Cruel laughter. The kind delivered behind gloved hands and practiced smiles. Arabella stood perfectly still through all of it. Years earlier, such humiliation would have shattered her. Now it merely exhausted her. Because she finally had something worth losing. Ravenshire. The children. Sebastian. That night she returned to the castle and sat awake until dawn. The decision formed slowly, painfully, inevitably. By morning she knew what she had to do. The kingdom would never stop talking. The scandal would never stop growing. Every day she remained would cost Sebastian more. She loved the family too much to allow that. 3 nights later, after everyone had gone to sleep, Arabella opened her wardrobe and began quietly packing. Folded dresses disappeared into luggage. Books were carefully wrapped. Letters were tied with ribbon. Outside, moonlight silvered the gardens. Inside, her heart broke silently. She paused only once. Her gaze lingered upon a drawing Rose had made. The entire family stood together beneath a summer sky. At the center stood Arabella. Not as a governess. As one of them. Tears blurred her vision. Then she placed the drawing inside her case. And down the corridor, unknown to her, Oliver Ravenshire stared through a slightly open doorway and realized she was preparing to leave forever. Oliver did not sleep that night. After discovering Arabella packing her belongings, he remained awake beside his bedroom window while moonlight washed across Ravenshire Castle. Below, the gardens shimmered beneath silver light, peaceful and unchanged. Everything else felt as though it was falling apart. For 6 years he had watched adults leave. Tutors, governesses, companions. Yes, every departure had strengthened his belief that nothing good lasted forever. Arabella had changed that. Now she was leaving too. Just before dawn, he quietly gathered his siblings inside the old schoolroom. Theo arrived first. Rose followed carrying a blanket around her shoulders. Henry stumbled in last, still half asleep. Oliver closed the door. What happened? Theo asked immediately. Oliver hesitated. Speaking the words somehow made them more real. Miss Hawthorne is leaving. Silence crashed over the room. Rose stared at him. No. I saw her packing. Henry blinked. Then blinked again. The meaning arrived slowly. Leaving where? I don't know. The little boy's face crumpled. Theo stood so abruptly his chair nearly toppled. No. The word emerged sharp and furious. She can't. She can, Oliver replied quietly. Everyone leaves. For a moment nobody spoke. Then Rose began crying. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just silent tears slipping down her cheeks. Oliver's heart broke watching her. Since Arabella's arrival, Rose had painted again. Smiled again. Dreamed again. Now all those fragile pieces seemed threatened. We have to stop her, Rose whispered. Theo nodded instantly. For once I agree. Henry looked from one sibling to another. She promised she'd stay. The simple statement cut deeper than any accusation. Children measured trust differently from adults. Promises mattered. Broken promises mattered even more. By breakfast, the household atmosphere had changed. Arabella sensed it immediately. The children spoke less than usual. Rose barely touched her food. Theo seemed permanently angry. Henry refused to sit anywhere except beside her. Only Oliver remained composed. Yet his silence carried unusual weight. Across the table, Sebastian noticed the tension as well. He noticed many things lately. Arabella's forced smiles. Her growing sadness. The distance she seemed determined to create. The realization troubled him far more than he wished to admit. Later that afternoon, Oliver requested a private conversation with his father. Sebastian agreed. They met inside the Duke's study. The room smelled faintly of leather and old books. For several moments Oliver simply stood there. Then years of restraint finally cracked. Why are you letting this happen? Sebastian looked up. Letting what happen? Her leaving. The word struck like a physical blow. Sebastian slowly rose from behind his desk. Who told you that? I saw her packing. Neither spoke. The silence confirmed everything. Oliver's expression hardened. You always tell us to protect our family. Oliver. No. For the first time in his life, the boy interrupted him. She saved us. Pain flashed across Sebastian's face. Yet Oliver continued. She saved Henry. She saved Rose. She even saved Theo. A pause followed. She saved me too. The confession landed heavily between them. Oliver swallowed hard. Then his voice softened. If she leaves because people are being cruel, then we're losing her the same way we lost Mother. The study became unbearably quiet. Sebastian could not immediately answer, because part of him feared his son was right. Meanwhile, Theo chose a different approach. The following day, while visiting the village with his tutor, he overheard several noble boys mocking Arabella. Normally he ignored insults. This time he didn't. The confrontation ended with torn jackets, bruised pride, and one extremely shocked tutor. When Sebastian later demanded an explanation, Theo answered without apology. They called her a fortune hunter. You fought them for that? Theo's jaw tightened. They don't know her. The response revealed more affection than any speech could have. That evening, Rose experienced her own breaking point. Arabella found her alone in the art room. Canvases covered the walls. Paints rested neatly across tables. Yet Rose sat motionless before a blank canvas. What troubles you? Arabella asked gently. The little girl's composure shattered instantly. Tears spilled freely. You'll leave. Arabella froze. Rose's voice trembled. Everyone leaves. The familiar sentence carried unbearable sadness. Arabella knelt beside her. Before she could speak, Rose threw her arms around her neck. "I don't want another governess." The child sobbed openly. "I want you." Arabella held her tightly. Yet no comforting words came, because she wanted exactly the same thing. The deepest wound arrived that night. Henry appeared at her bedroom door carrying a stuffed rabbit. His eyes looked swollen from crying. Arabella immediately invited him inside. Without speaking, he climbed into her lap. Several minutes passed before he finally whispered the question haunting him. "Did I do something wrong?" The words shattered her heart. "No." "Then why are you leaving?" Arabella closed her eyes. How could she explain society? Scandal? Reputation? None of it mattered to a 5-year-old child. Only love mattered. Only belonging mattered. Henry pressed closer. Then, for the first time while fully awake, he spoke the word he had whispered in his sleep. "Please don't go, Mama." Tears filled Arabella's eyes. She could no longer deny what had happened between them. Somewhere along the way, this family had become hers. The following morning, Sebastian received information from an elderly estate accountant. The discovery began as a simple conversation regarding old financial records. It ended by changing everything. Years earlier, after Duchess Eleanor's death, a devastating winter had struck Ravenshire lands. Several tenant families faced starvation. Others lacked medicine. Children became ill. Widows struggled to survive. The accountant revealed that anonymous donations had arrived during the crisis. Substantial donations. Enough to save countless lives. For years nobody knew the benefactor's identity. Now newly uncovered documents revealed the truth. Arabella Hawthorne. Using the final remnants of her inheritance. Expecting no recognition. Seeking no reward. Simply helping because people needed help. Sebastian spent hours reading every record. Every receipt. Every letter. The more he learned, the more one truth became impossible to ignore. Arabella possessed the same compassion that had made Eleanor beloved. Not an imitation. Not a replacement. Her own rare kind of goodness. And suddenly he understood something else. He loved her. The realization arrived with startling clarity. Not gradually. Not uncertainly. Completely. Unfortunately, by the time he reached her room, it was empty. Arabella had already left Ravenshire Castle. Worse still, she had not left alone. 4 sets of small footprints discovered near the main road revealed the truth immediately. Oliver, Theo, Rose, Henry. The children had followed her. As panic erupted across the estate, Sebastian mounted his horse and raced toward the capital, where the kingdom's grand royal celebration was already underway. Hours later, amid crowded streets filled with nobles, banners, music, and thousands of spectators, he finally saw her. Arabella stood beside a waiting carriage at the edge of the celebration grounds. The 4 children surrounded her. And as Sebastian pushed through the crowd toward them, royal trumpets suddenly sounded across the square, announcing the arrival of the entire kingdom's aristocracy. The royal celebration transformed the capital into a sea of color, music, and glittering nobility. Silk banners fluttered from balconies. Carriages lined marble avenues. Military bands filled the afternoon air with triumphant melodies. Thousands gathered beneath crystal blue skies to witness the kingdom's most prestigious social event. Yet Duke Sebastian Ravenshire noticed none of it. His entire world narrowed to a single woman standing beside a carriage. Arabella. The 4 children clustered around her as though determined to form a living shield. Relief surged through him when he saw they were safe. Fear followed immediately afterward. Because the expression on Arabella's face told him she still intended to leave. He pushed through the crowd. Nobles stepped aside instinctively. Servants hurried from his path. His heartbeat thundered louder than the music. When he finally reached them, Henry was the first to react. "Father." The little boy ran forward. Sebastian lifted him briefly before setting him down. Then his gaze returned to Arabella. For a moment neither spoke. Everything they wished to say seemed too large for words. Oliver broke the silence. "We aren't letting her go." Theo folded his arms. "Not this time." Rose moved closer to Arabella. "She belongs with us." The certainty in their voices stunned nearby spectators. People were beginning to watch. Whispers spread rapidly. Names traveled through the crowd. The Duke, the Governess, the scandal. Across the square, Lady Celeste Ashcombe observed the scene from beneath an elegant parasol. Her confidence remained intact. After all, the kingdom expected only one outcome. Soon Sebastian would make the sensible choice. The respectable choice. The noble choice. He would distance himself from controversy and restore order. At least that was what everyone believed. Royal trumpets sounded again. Members of the aristocracy began assembling before the grand platform erected at the center of the celebration grounds. The king's ministers arrived. Influential families gathered. Reporters hurried into position. Attention gradually shifted toward Sebastian. The moment had arrived. Arabella felt it too, which was why she stepped backward. "This has gone far enough," she said quietly. Sebastian stared at her. "No. You've already sacrificed enough." "I'm not sacrificing anything. Your reputation is suffering." "I don't care." The answer emerged instantly. Without hesitation. Without doubt. Arabella looked away. "Perhaps you don't. But your children deserve peace." At that, Henry wrapped both arms around her waist. "I want you." The little boy's voice trembled. Rose reached for her hand. "So do I." Theo moved beside them. "We all do." Oliver stood tallest among his siblings. His gaze never wavered. "Your family." The simple declaration struck every listener with unexpected force. Arabella's composure faltered. Tears gathered despite her efforts to stop them. Sebastian saw them. And suddenly he understood exactly what needed to happen. For years he had allowed duty to govern every decision. Duty after his wife's death. Duty to his title. Duty to society. Duty to expectations. Yet duty alone had never healed his children. Duty had never filled empty corridors with laughter. Duty had never taught Rose to paint again. Duty had never given Henry comfort. Love had done those things. Arabella had done those things. The realization swept away every remaining hesitation. Before anyone could stop him, Sebastian turned and began walking toward the center of the celebration grounds. The crowd parted instantly. Confusion rippled outward. Arabella watched in bewilderment. The children exchanged uncertain glances. Lady Celeste smiled. Clearly the Duke intended to make some formal announcement. Exactly as expected. Sebastian reached the grand platform. Thousands of eyes followed him. The square gradually fell silent. Even the musicians stopped playing. For one long moment he stood before the assembled aristocracy. Then he spoke. His voice carried across the entire square. 6 years ago I lost my wife. The honesty of the opening stunned listeners. I believed my duty was to endure that loss quietly. Silence deepened. I believed protecting my children meant teaching them strength. His gaze found Oliver. The truth is that they needed love. His eyes moved toward Theo. They needed patience. Then Rose. They needed kindness. Finally Henry. They needed hope. Emotion tightened his voice. And one woman gave them all those things. Murmurs spread through the audience. Lady Celeste's smile began fading. Sebastian continued. Society tells us that birth determines worth. His expression hardened. Society is wrong. The statement landed like thunder. Reporters scribbled furiously. Nobles exchanged shocked looks. Sebastian looked directly toward the crowd where Arabella stood frozen. Character determines worth. Every word carried absolute conviction. Compassion determines worth. His voice softened. Love determines worth. Then, before the astonished kingdom, he stepped down from the platform and crossed the square. Not toward royalty. Not toward titled ladies. Not toward Lady Celeste. He walked directly to Arabella. Gasps echoed throughout the celebration. Arabella's breath caught. Sebastian stopped before her. For a heartbeat, the entire world seemed suspended. Then he lowered himself onto one knee. The square erupted. Shock swept through nobles and commoners alike. Lady Celeste stared in disbelief. Several ministers appeared incapable of speech. Yet Sebastian noticed none of them. His attention never left Arabella. You gave my children back their happiness. His voice was quiet now. Personal. Real. You gave life back to Ravenshire. Tears slipped down Arabella's cheeks. Sebastian smiled gently. I offered you a home. Emotion threatened to break his composure. But somewhere along the way you became mine. A collective silence settled over the crowd. Then Oliver stepped forward. She's family. Theo joined him. She's home. Rose wiped her eyes. She's my mother. Henry launched himself into Arabella's arms. I love you, Mama. The final barrier around her heart shattered completely. Sebastian reached into his pocket. A ring glimmered beneath afternoon sunlight. Not extravagant. Not chosen for display. Chosen for meaning. Arabella Hawthorne, he said softly. Will you become my wife, my Duchess, and the heart of our family? The entire kingdom waited. Arabella looked at the children. At Henry clinging to her. At Rose's hopeful smile. At Theo's stubborn determination. At Oliver's quiet faith. Then she looked at Sebastian. The man who had seen her value when nobody else had. The man who chose love over pride. The man she loved. Yes. The word barely left her lips before cheers exploded across the square. Applause thundered from every direction. Even many nobles who had once mocked her joined the celebration, because some truths were too powerful to deny. Months later, summer sunlight bathed the gardens of Ravenshire Castle in gold. Rose painted beneath blooming roses. Theo raced Henry across the lawn. Oliver laughed while helping them cheat. Near a fountain, Arabella stood beside Sebastian as warm wind carried the scent of flowers through the estate. The castle no longer felt haunted by loss. It felt alive. Sebastian slipped an arm around his Duchess and watched their children fill the gardens with joy. Once he had offered a rejected governess a home because 4 lonely children needed a mother. What he received in return was something infinitely greater. A family restored. A future reborn. And a love strong enough to transform an entire kingdom.